Sure. I think the trends have been active for some time now. It is not a sudden phenomenon. In fact, as a company, we have been around for 16 years. And even early in that period, right, in the 2006-7 time frame, organizations are already starting to realize that there is a lot of data that is being generated by all the IT systems and applications that they have implemented. These could be ERPs, this could be transaction processing system, operating systems, operational systems. It could be CRM, for example, or HRIMS, right? I mean, organizations have moved significantly in terms of putting in information technology and applications to help with running the processes. And that is generating a lot of data. But the challenge for most organizations, though, was like, how do they improve the quality of decision making, right? In spite of all of the data. In fact, we used to say that organizations are swimming in data, but they are starved for information, right, and insights. And that is really the main trend that set us off, right, in this direction. That data analytics can be a fairly significant and important leverage for organizations to make high quality business decisions, right, and optimize their processes. So that's been the main founding philosophy. And I think that trend itself is still playing out. In fact, I would say that most organizations are still only scratching the surface in terms of the quantum of data that they are really analyzing and putting it to use, right? The other few things that have helped in relation to this is that one, there is even more data that is being generated, more and more of interactions between companies and their customers or even their employees. They're all being intermediated through digital channels, right, in one form or the other. A lot of interactions these days is through online mechanisms, and that generates a lot more data than what used to be generated before, right, when people are interacting in person physically, right, with one another. So there's a lot more data today, and that's the second important point. And the third thing is that processing the data has also become a lot simpler. Not that we have more sophisticated algorithms. I think there are a few high quality sophisticated algorithms being developed, but many of the algorithms that data analytics companies use are really ones that have been around for 20, 30 years or even longer. What has changed, though, is that the ease with which data can be stored and the ease with which data can be manipulated, right, that has dramatically increased. So the cost of storing data and the cost of computation, the cost of memory and processing, that has come down significantly. And that means that organizations are able to make use of those algorithms and the data to help them optimize their processes and enable high quality decision making. So in some sense, those are all very secular trends, right, that you will see across all kinds of organizations in general, right? Overall, world economy is experiencing all of these trends. And I think in some sense, even though all of that is happening, most organizations still have a lot to do in terms of how they can put data to use, right, in terms of driving decision making. I would like to say that a lot of the work that we do, for example, is really around understanding human behavior, right, in some shape and form. Whether it is consumer behavior or employee behavior or patient behavior or citizen behavior, right? And human behavior is a fairly complex topic. Even though we are generating a lot more data about human interactions, we still have a long way to go in terms of how do you understand the nuances of the data and how do you help it to uncover, right, the mysteries of human behavior. So in some sense, we are still in very early stages of evolution of the data analytics space. The good thing is that there is a lot of focus and attention by not only companies interested in driving their optimization and decision making, but there is also service providers like us. There are people who are doing research in the space. We all know about generative AI and ChatGPT, for example. Right? So all of this stuff is driving a lot more action in just being able to harness the data, bring it all together, and use it for high quality decision making. So I would say that broadly, those are the things that are kind of driving the action in this space. So I think a very important aspect of this would be to believe in and act upon the idea that data and analytics can make a huge difference to decision making within the organization, right? So in some sense, we call it the data analytics maturity, right, of an organization. Organizations that are high on the maturity curve, they realize, understand, and they have the right kind of structures as well as mechanisms in place that enable the harvesting of all of the data and the use of the data, right, to drive high quality decision making. And which means that pretty much any decision that they would take within the company, the first question that they will ask is, what does the data show, right? We want to change a process, we want to change a policy, we want to offer a higher discount, we want to increase the inventory that we store in a particular place, we want to cut down the production of this line. It could be any of those decisions, right? The question that organizations that are high on the maturity, they ask is, what does the data indicate, right? I mean, should we do this? And what is the data and analytics indicating in terms of which direction we should pull this lever and by how much, rather than operating from a gut feel, right? Unfortunately, in many organizations today, even in what you would call very hard disciplines like finance, supply chain, for example, you still have a lot of that baggage in terms of saying that this is how you have done it in the past, and therefore that's how we do it now. Don't worry about what the data might be telling us, right? It may not be deliberate, but it could be because of how organizations have evolved over the last several decades. And if you take slightly fuzzy areas like marketing or talent and employees, for example, right, it becomes even more challenging because traditionally these areas have been considered as slightly soft and fuzzy areas as opposed to the hard number-driven areas like supply chain or finance. So therefore, that challenge is always there. So organizations that would want to move up on the analytics maturity curve would do well to focus on how can we try and drive as much of the decision making within the organization based on what the data tells us, right? I mean, you would have heard the remark, I think this is attributed to Deming or somebody, right? And that God we trust and everybody else brings data. In some sense, right, that kind of encapsulates what organizations can do and should do, right, if they want to be very objective about their decision making. Otherwise, you get caught in what could be illogical or irrational type of choices that you make just because this is how it has been done in the past, any baggage that exists, right, around decision making, or the lack of any serious attempt to look at, why should we not try something different, right, or new based on what the data tells us. So I think those are the challenges that organizations need to overcome. So in some sense, when we look at organizations that are high on the maturity curve, we see that they have created the type of org structures that enable, first of all, that data is captured at the level of granularity, at the frequency at which it needs to be captured, right at the source. And there are systems in place, right, that can capture the data, that can record the data. Many organizations have implemented good IT systems and applications to do that, but it'll be useful to take a look at that again, right, to see whether the granularity and the frequency point that I mentioned has been taken care of. Secondly, organizations then need to create what are called good high quality data analytics platforms, because data is typically scattered across the enterprise. There are different business units, there are different organizational functional units, there are geographical separations. So typically you will see that data is scattered across the organization in multiple silos and systems. If you want to do high quality data analytics and use the analytics to drive decision making, then you need to be able to build those type of data platforms that can bring together data from multiple parts of the enterprise. So you need to have that kind of a construct in place. And then also to generally drive the philosophy of decision making, that any decision has to be supported by data and analytics. So which means that you are encouraging the formation and use of analytics teams, right, in whatever shape and form. They could be central teams, or they could be embedded within the different functions and the geographies. They could be a hub and spoke model, right? All these models are fine. But the general philosophy has to be that any decision we make, we will look at what the data tells us, right? We'll be objective to the extent possible. There will always still be instances where you cannot be 100% objective, which is okay. But the point is that the general philosophy has to be that we will be very objective in the decision making. I think if those constructs come into place, then it starts attracting the right kind of people and talent as well. Because more often than not, what I hear from data analytics professionals, the ones that we interact with our clients and prospects, right, in their organizations, is that they get frustrated because they're doing a lot of work in terms of bringing the data together or building high quality models and dashboards. But at the end of the day, if people don't act on them, if people are not making use of the analytics to drive decision making, then it becomes an exercise in a vacuum, right? Meaning that nobody is really bothered about what is being done within the analytics team. So you got to change that mindset and then say that, okay, every initiative, I mean, while not everything might get implemented, there is a fairly strong push and drive towards using analytics as the key driver, right, for decision making. And if that starts happening, then all challenges related to talent, infrastructure, right, those things will automatically get addressed. I mean, the big challenge with all data analytics, of course, is the challenge of confidentiality and privacy and what are people willing to share. I mentioned earlier that a lot of the work that we do is about understanding human behavior. And as individuals, right, whether I'm an employee or whether I'm a customer walking into a store, I would like to get personalized attention and treatment, right? I don't like it, for example, if a company quotes HR policies at me and tells me, no, this is the policy and therefore this is what it'll be, right? I would like to be treated as a unique individual, whether I am walking into a company as an employee, whether I'm walking into a mall or an outlet, right, as a customer, whether I'm walking into a hospital as a patient, right? I would want these people to understand my uniqueness and individuality and tailor their products and services to what I need, right? So we all have this need for personalization, right, and being treated as unique people. But at the same time, we are also careful that we don't want to give away all the data about ourselves, because anybody, whether you talk about a hospital or a company or a service provider, they cannot give you personalized service unless they know about you, for which you need to open up and share information about yourself. But that also doesn't mean that this information is indiscriminately available, right, to everybody. So in some sense, the direction in which this topic will evolve is around how can individuals control how much of data about themselves, right, is made available to any of these people, right? Their company, their service provider, their hospital, right, their government, whatever it might be. We should be able to control what data we reveal about ourselves, in what quantum, right, at what frequency, for what purpose, when can we give and revoke access, right? So those are all the things that you need to take care of. So from a balancing standpoint, organizations will have to tread that carefully, meaning that obviously any company that is looking at providing high quality services to their B2B, B2C customers, right, by leveraging the power of data analytics, they would want to get to that level of understanding of the uniqueness, right, using the data that is available. But they will also have to balance it out with the data privacy and the confidentiality, right, concerns, right, that emerge. The other important ethical point is that today we are building a lot of models and applications which are what are technically called as black box models, right, using technologies like GPT-4, neural networks, deep learning, and all that. The challenge with some of these things is that it's very hard for you to go into the model and then figure out how the model is working. It's like as hard as figuring out how the mind of another human works. You can only guess based on a person's behavior, right, what they might be thinking. You cannot go into their mind and then figure out what are they thinking and why are they doing what they're doing. You can only see what they are doing, and then you can make some inferences about how they might be thinking. Some of the models that are being built today are along those lines, right? They are called black box models. And the challenge with black box models is you cannot really go inside and figure out what the model itself has understood about its context, or about the human world, the world in which we live. And those are some of the challenges that are being talked about today. I mean, you would have read about the recent on the back of GPT-4, right? There were very prominent people who came together very recently, and they have asked for a moratorium, a 6-month moratorium on any further research into large language models and GPT-4 type of technology, because they are worried that these models, we will not be able to understand how they are wired and how they function internally, and they can rival human intelligence very quickly, right? So those kind of challenges are there. At a minimum, we need to be taking ethical, moral responsibility for what are we building, what kind of models we are building. Secondly, we should also be careful about our behavior around these models. Many of these models, not just now, but also in the future, they will learn more and more through their interaction with humans and how they see human behavior around them. So if they see bad human behavior around them, then they will likely imbibe some of those characteristics, right, into that model. It is like if you have a child coming up in a very violent home, for example, the child will inherit some of those tendencies, right? It's like that. That's what might be happening. And you cannot really go in and then rewire it either, because we don't even know how those models are being built because they are black box models. So we got to be careful about these things in terms of how do we as humans behave around these models, that we don't end up actually passing on some of the bad qualities that we might have as humans, right, into these models also. So these are some of the big challenges that people are grappling with. No easy answers, but people have to be conscientious about these things, and then work towards increasing understanding, taking time to pause and think about these matters, right, and then moving carefully, right, in the right directions. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about generally what is happening in the industry, this is still a very fragmented space. While large organizations like an Accenture or a Capgemini or a TCS or an Infosys, they are building their analytics practices. You also have the likes of consulting firms like a McKinsey, BCG, right? They are building analytics capabilities. But at the end of the day, if you look at the number of players that are there in the space, there are a very large number of very small service providers, right? Companies that might be just $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, or less than $10 million in revenue, and there are so many of them, right? In so many different all the important parts where action is happening, right, in data analytics, whether it is the US or Europe or whether it is Asia Pacific, right? So this fragmentation is something that will continue, and because the space is very hot, and as I said earlier, right, it's very nascent, and it is only starting to evolve and getting bigger. This will automatically attract investors. I'm not talking about investors into a company like LatentView Analytics, right? I mean, because we are a publicly limited company, and what is happening in the market and who buys our stock and so I'm not commenting on that. I'm just talking about investors being attracted to data analytics space, right, as the space itself. I think that will continue to increase in the coming years because there's just so much of action and so much possibility, right, in this space. So therefore, I don't see any kind of slowdown on that front. I mean, right now, of course, there's a little bit of this lull and uncertainty, because of the inflation and other war and other challenges that you're hearing about. But these things will resolve, right? Either over the next couple of quarters or a few quarters, and then the momentum will be back. You will also see some consolidation, though. Okay, meaning that at some point in time, it'll make sense for larger players, right, to emerge. Even pure play data analytics companies, right? And then therefore there will be some consolidation. Some of the smaller players within this fragmented ecosystem will get acquired, they'll get taken over and all of that. Some mergers will happen, right? But that's okay. I mean, that is the typical process in which any industry evolves. At this point in time, I believe that investment into the sector will continue to be fairly hot. We have identified five important pillars of growth for us, and I've been talking about this even in other interactions. First thing is that from a geography standpoint, we are very heavily focused on the US market till date, and we had made public our plans to double down on the European market in recent times, and that is something that we already kickstarted. I mean, over the last 6 months, we have been building a fairly strong team in Europe. We now have close to a dozen people there who are in the front end, right, who are exploring opportunities and who are having conversations with clients and prospects. So Europe will be a very important focus area for us, right, from a geographic standpoint. We are also running a small experiment in India, APAC, but I'll talk about this now maybe at a later point in time. I mean, the real big shift from a geographic standpoint, I wouldn't say shift. I mean, it's more an add-on, right? I mean, US will always continue to be an important geography for us, but we're also doubling down on Europe. So that is one big thing. Secondly, from an industry standpoint, we have been doing most of our work in the technology and the digital native space, and not so much of action in BFSI or retail or consumer packaged goods and so on. So those are sectors where we are focusing on. So specifically BFSI, banking, financial services, insurance, and retail, right? These are two industry sectors which we are focused on, and a lot of the ideation and the build out of offerings and value proposition is aimed at companies in this space, right? So that's an area that will be important for us. And then from a capability standpoint, again, there are two areas that we are really pushing hard on. One is supply chain analytics, and the second one is data engineering. I talked about earlier how it is important for organizations to pull together data from disparate ecosystems, all the silos that they have, and create that platform on which analytics can be done, right? So the data engineering is the core work that needs to happen, right, to make that possible. So we are actually spending a lot of time and effort, right, in building out the data engineering capabilities. Similarly, supply chain analytics, we have seen a huge amount of interest, especially on the back of the pandemic, with all the supply chain disruptions that global companies have experienced, right, in the last 2-3 years. This remains a very, very important area of focus for most organizations. And we have a connected view supply chain offering that is aimed at addressing different kinds of problems and opportunities, right, that supply chain persona face. And that's what really we are driving into the market. So these are some areas of focus. There are other things, of course, like stepping up on what we do in the marketing analytics space around full funnel marketing, right, or growth marketing. There's a lot of work that we are doing on the advanced analytics, data science space around graph theory and application of graph theory, around natural language generation as well as processing and image analytics, right? So these are areas of focus. With some of these areas, the take up, right, they all will have slightly different slopes, right, in terms of how quickly, right, they pick up. But at this point in time, we are putting in the time and effort, right, to build the right kind of value propositions and offerings, right, that will drive the action, right, in these spaces. So yeah, I would say that these are the ones that are top of mind at this time. You can very easily get overwhelmed by everything that is happening around you. In general, I would say that while there may be 200 things that might seem interesting, what will be important is focus to pick a few things that you believe can change the game in terms of the quality of decision making within the organization. One of the services that we provide is what we call analytics consulting and advisory services, where we help an organization figure out what should be their analytics strategy, right, over the next 2-3 years, and what should be the set of initiatives that they undertake, given, right, so much that is happening, right, all the art of the possible. And that exercise typically culminates in the identification of high priority, high impact initiatives, which the organization needs to execute in the short, medium, immediate term, right? So that's really what we help identify. We also set up a roadmap of initiatives, right, over the next 2-3 years. I think any organization or any leader, individual embarking on analytics initiatives within their organization, they should take a look at that first, right, in terms of, okay, what is the data that I already have access to? What kind of use cases and problem statements are my internal clients coming to me with? Can I evaluate whether with the data that is available, I can actually help them address those pain points or opportunities? And if I do, what will be the likely business impact? And using all of this information, prioritize those initiatives, right, based on the impact that you're likely to get and the ease with which it'll be possible to execute on that initiative. So if you do that exercise, then typically you will end up with a set of initiatives that make sense to you because you can do them. There is a high degree of confidence, right, that we can execute the initiative, and you also know that the impact will be high, right? So those would be the first set of initiatives that any organization or any leader should take up, and then they can keep building on it, right, as they go along. Because as with any new technology area, analytics also people want to see the real benefits, right, of starting to use data to drive decision making. Otherwise, you can always argue that, no, I have done this for 20 years. I know how to take care of this stuff, right? I know how to make the right decisions. But you need to show proof that data analytics driven decision making can be a lot more impactful, that it can actually generate more revenue, that it can unlock value, that it can help you save cost, right? So all these things need to come through in the first few initiatives that you undertake, so that you build the traction, momentum, ownership, and conviction, right, within the organization. So I think that's what I would recommend. Pick a few high impact initiatives that can be executed, execute them well, show the success, and then success will breed more success.